friends, welcome back to the channel. I hope you guys are all doing really well. So we haven't done a reading wrap up in a while here, a recent reads video. I did my last one back in February, and as you guys know, I've been going through a super crappy reading slump, like pretty much all of 2024 so far. But I have started getting back into my reading, so I wanted to share the books that I've read since my last wrap up. And you know, we had some great ones. Actually, I read some really fantastic books, and then not so great ones. Then we had some DNFs. So yeah, we're gonna jump right into the video here. Happy halfway to Halloween, by the way, and happy Old School April. There'll be some more Old School April content coming up on the channel here pretty soon, but for right now, we're gonna jump into the DNFs. So one super disappointing DNF that I had, and this is one of those situations where I DNF'd it, but you know, I'm just setting it aside for now. So I stopped reading it. I picked this book up several times and tried to read it, and each time I was just disinterested. So this is Sleepless by Lou Morgan, and it is part of the Red Eye series, which is the same series that has like Frozen Charlotte and Charlotte Says in it. So I did buy the box set a little while ago. Probably about a little over a year ago. And I did read both of the Frozen Charlotte books, and I read The Lighthouse, and there was another one that I read as well. So I went ahead and picked up one of the books by one of the other authors in the series, and this is about like basically this elite school, so it's very like dark academia, private school sort of thing. And these kids have exams coming, and they decide to take these pills to try to stay awake to study, and all hell breaks loose. And of course, by the red on the kids' hands, they start going murderous. And I didn't get very far into this book. I think I'm about 25 to 30% in. I'm not really sure. I'm really disinterested. I don't like the characters. Like I don't have any connection with them, and I don't know, just every time that I pick it up, I'm just, you know, kind of whatever, and then I set it aside for a few days and try it again and set it aside. So I was just like, you know what, I'm just gonna stop reading it completely. I actually have it on physical. I also bought it on my Kindle as well because I thought maybe doing a different format would help, but it just isn't. So I'm gonna stick this back on my shelf. I haven't DNF'd it for forever. I am going to give it a chance again, but I think it's just the characters. I'm not really attached to them whatsoever, but the premise sounds really good, so I do want to pick this up again. And then the second book that I DNF'd was the Invocations by Crystal Sutherland. And this book, I got it on my Kindle. I wanted to read it as part of Amy McCaw's YA book club. And again, this was one that I just set aside because it just wasn't appealing to me at the time, I think maybe. But I did find the writing was overly descriptive, and it seemed a little bit on the pompous side. And, you know, the premise sounded pretty cool, but I don't know if it's the writing style that I'm not liking about this, because I really don't, or if it's just that I'm not in the mood for it right now. So I did decide to put this one aside. Unfortunately, I didn't get to watch the wrap-up discussion for this book, but it just wasn't appealing to me at the time. So the two DNFs that I had recently, you know, I'll probably pick up again. I have this one on my Kindle as well, so, you know, I might give them another try. But with this one, it was just, like I said, the writing seemed to be overly descriptive, where it took like a page or two to kind of describe things, and then it just seemed a little bit pompous. So gonna set this one aside, but I'll probably pick it up again. And then I did end up picking up the Blair Witch Files book that I got. I showed this in a haul about 2 months ago that I found it at the thrift store. So the Blair Witch does have a book series, and this kind of follows after what happens in the first movie. So I didn't even know these existed. This is book 6, called The Prisoner, and basically this follows Heather's cousin, Cade, he gets really interested in the Blair Witch legend and what happened to the first group of kids that went into the woods. And so this young girl writes him from jail because she has been found guilty of murdering her boyfriend, but she claims that like the Blair Witch was responsible, and if she tells anybody her story, they end up dead. And this was really fantastic. I really enjoyed this book. It was everything that I wanted in a YA, and it wasn't like mixed media, but it did have, you know, if he was reading an article it would write out what was in the article, and then it would be like Cade's note, and he would have a note written in there for kind of his own thoughts of what was going on, how it wrapped into this girl's case. And then besides that storyline that was going on, he was also doing his own research as well and trying to tie the Blair Witch legend back to like the Salem witch trials and all of this kind of thing. So it's very, very in-depth, and it's written like the old school YAs that I love. There's no fluff. It's a short book, right? Just a little trade paperback, and it was a straightforward story. It had the twists and turns. It was interesting, and I really, really enjoyed it. It didn't get into too much of like overly developing things. It was perfect. So I'm definitely going to keep an eye out for these. I did look more of the Blair Witch books up on eBay, and they go for like $30 to $50 each. So the fact that I found this one in the thrift store just makes it that much better. So if you happen to come across any of these Blair Witch books, definitely pick them up, give them a try if you're into like the old school 80s and 90s YA style writing. I really, really enjoyed this. I can't wait to give some more of them a go. So as for star rating, I guess I gave this one 4 stars. And then next up, as part of the Gothic Hearts Reading Challenge, which unfortunately I didn't get to most of the books that I wanted to read during February, just with that reading slump that I was in, but I did reread The Turn of the Key by Ruth Ware, which is a remake of The Turn of the Screw. And I really enjoyed this book. I think I enjoyed it the second time I read it more so than the first time. And I read this one on audio. It's one of my favorite audiobooks, I have to say. The narrator does a fantastic job, and it really does a good job at that eerie kind of atmosphere in this huge smart house in like the 2000s. So basically this is a modern reimagining of that whole situation. And I loved it. I read it back and forth to work as I was commuting, and it was just perfect. And it was, you know, here, you know, we're in winter, it's cold and it's snowy or rainy or whatever, so it really added to that atmosphere of my reread. And you know, the first time I read this, I think I gave it like 3 or 3.5 stars, so I did bump up my star rating the second time I read it. I really enjoyed it a lot more the second time, and if you're gonna read this one, if you haven't read it yet, I would definitely recommend the audio. And then as part of my Haunted Victorian Book Club, the February pick was Bluebeard's Castle by Anna Biller. And we had quite a fantastic feminist rant in the live show that we did for this one. So if you don't know, I do run a book club, a monthly book club, and it's all Gothic and Gothic adjacent kind of reads. And usually the first Saturday of the following month, we do a live discussion, and I have guests on there. So I had Jen from Literary Love 123 and Jacki from the Jersey Ghouls podcast, 2 of my very, very favorite people in the world. And we had a great discussion about this one. So this is a very, very popular book. It's recently published, I believe towards the end of 2023 this one came out, and I gave this one, I think, 2 stars. The other 2 girls gave it 1 star, and I said I gave it 2 for a specific reason, and now I can't even remember why. I think because I just want to put this book... Oh, the only reason was because the writing, Anna Biller's writing was technically sound. So there wasn't problems with grammar or spelling or, you know, things being convoluted or whatever. So it was technically sound. So I rounded it up to a 2 star from a 1 star. But, you know, the more I think about this book, like, I think a 2 star is even being generous. It's supposed to be a feminist look at a Gothic story, and she very much is comparing herself to, like, Jane Eyre and all of those kinds of classics, and it's not that whatsoever. It's very, very cringeworthy. It's probably one of the worst books that I've read ever. It's definitely going to be one of the worst books that I've read this year. I know it will be. And so if you're interested in hearing more thoughts, because we did go into it in depth, both on my Discord for the Haunted Victorian Book Club and through our discussion. So if you want to listen to the discussion, you could just go into the live section on this channel, and it's in there. So yeah. Neither one of us liked this book, and most of the people that read it in my Discord didn't like it either. So unfortunately, the first couple of books that we read for the book club weren't great. So this is like 3 books deep now, and you know, we haven't hit a fantastic read yet, but there is one coming up, so I'm excited about that. But as for Bluebeard's Castle, It has beautiful cover art, and that's really the only good thing that I can say about this one. But of course, I'm never going to discourage anyone from reading a book. So if you're interested in this one, you want to pick it up, I would love to hear your thoughts on it. And then the book that absolutely snapped me out of my reading slump, which I couldn't wait to hit. You know, whenever I'm in a reading slump, there's usually one book that just snaps me right out of it. And one of those authors that can do that almost instantly is Darcy Coates. So this is a duology. I actually read both, but I read a couple of books between the first and second ones. So this is House of Shadows, Ghosts and Shadows, book 1. And usually Darcy Coates' books take place more in the modern day, but this takes place, I don't think it actually says, but I think it's kind of like Victorian era. So this is about a young girl who her father, she's very well-to-do. So her father is in, I believe, the shipping business, and he hits a snag with his investments where the ship, you know, he invests basically all of his money in this particular batch of silks, and the ship sinks and he loses everything. And the only thing that's going to save his family is marrying his daughter to this other gentleman who's very, very well off. And, you know, she's like, I mean, back in those days, she was probably 16, 17, 18 and has to marry a stranger. So he whisks her off to his mansion, and the staff is very standoffish. His sister is kind of weird. She is finding it hard to find her place. And of course, the relationship between the two of them is, you know, I mean, it's kind of standoffish at first. She doesn't even know him. He's a lot older than she is. And then, of course, we start having the supernatural happen with the house, and just the build of that whole thing. It's very reminiscent of Rebecca, and I love that aspect of it. I loved watching the relationship develop between her and her new husband, and the supernatural elements are fantastic. But of course, you have the classic Darcy Coates atmosphere and spookiness and creepiness, and I love that it took place in kind of like Victorian, Edwardian kind of period, which is sort of outside of her normal haunted house kind of books, which I've read a lot of them that take place in the modern period. So this book was great. You know, I gave it like 4.5 stars, but I'm like eking it up towards a 5 because I know what happens in the second book as well. But this was the one that absolutely snapped me out of that reading slump. I was so happy to finally hit that gem that just snapped me out of everything. And so I've been reading a lot more lately. And there is going to be a video coming up here. I discussed it with a couple of people in my Sunday morning crew, because I do sprints usually on Sunday mornings, that I am going to be having a Darcy Coates video coming up probably after Old School April, and talking about like where to start with her books, or, you know, because she has so many of them and it's hard to know where to start, what's good, what's not good, and all of that sort of thing. But if you're looking for a slam bang one that's very gothic, taking place in kind of that Victorian era, this duology is definitely it. And then I did do another reread in March, going into the kind of the first couple of days of April, and that is Helter Skelter. And this is one of my picks for Old School April. It is a very, very, very long book. I believe it's 600 to 700 pages, but it's fantastic. And my favorite way to read this one, this is my 3rd time reading this book, because I wanted to do kind of a themed video coming up after Old School April as well, on kind of like the Manson family. And this book is the best source material that is out there, in my opinion. It fills in all of the gaps, all of the questions, everything. And even though it can be a little bit dry in sections, because it can be very technical and there's a lot of interviews and stuff like that, the best way to read this is on audio, because you can just throw it on, and usually I'm working on the library or whatever. And it's just fantastic. If you're into true crime and, you know, the 60s and the Manson family situation and all of that, this is fantastic if you've never ever read it. Like I said, it's very, very long, but audio is the best way that I can probably recommend for you to consume it. And for my 3rd time around, of course, I did give this one a full 5 stars. So again, this is one of my host recs for Old School April as well. If you want to throw this one on, I can't recommend this book enough. And then next up, kind of lightening the atmosphere a little bit, I read a point horror. So I read The Babysitter by R.L. Stine as part of Shelley's point horror book club. And it was the perfect opportunity for me to finally pick this one up. I've had this one on my shelf for years, never ever read it. I didn't read it as a kid. And this was fantastic. It was hilarious. It was cheesy and, you know, just a popcorn read. And it was classic R.L. Stine with, you know, the just the atmosphere of 80s and 90s babysitters. And of course he had that classic, like at the end of a chapter it would have, you know, something terrible is happening with a cliffhanger, and then you realize in the next chapter that it was just the cat walking into the room or whatever. So very much had that. But by the time you got to the end, it was great. Like when they revealed the twist of the person that's terrorizing this poor babysitter and what's going on, and she's receiving letters and kind of breathy phone calls and all of this sort of thing. And so I really liked this. I'd say that, you know, this was like a 3.5-star read for me, and I'm definitely going to read the other books in the Babysitter kind of mini-series. I think there's 4 of them, and I've heard that the Babysitter 2 is not great, but I am going to be reading it as part of my old school April TBR. And yeah, but for the first one, I really enjoyed this. I can't wait to pick up more point horror and Fear Street and all of those kinds of ones, because they're just, you know, you can kind of sink into them and it takes you out of the real world for just a little while. And then from The Babysitter, I did go back to book 2 of Ghosts and Shadows by Darcy Coates. So this is Book of Secrets. So this is the follow-up to the one that broke me out of my reading slump. And the second book, I think, is even better than the first. I love the main character in this book. She's so resourceful, and, you know, you have those hints of feminism in there. The relationship between her and her husband is just building. And then the supernatural story of this one, you know, it's not your normal haunted house book. I'll say that. I won't say what it is or what's going on or whatever, but it's not your normal haunted house book, and it does have to do with like generational curses, and I love that. And in the second part of the book, she spends a lot of time in this gigantic library in this huge mansion that belonged to this like spinster old lady, and that just added to the whole atmosphere. So I did read both of these books on audio. I started the first one on my Kindle, but I did find that they had it on Everand, and the narrator really does a great job with these two. So if you're looking to read these ones and you have a subscription with Everand, the audiobooks are really great. Unfortunately, I had a situation where I was reading the second book, and then, you know, I went to turn on my app on my phone one day and it was gone. Both of the books were gone, and I had only made it like halfway through the second one, and I think that it was gone for 2 days, and then it came back. So it said during that period that I didn't have licensing for that book, and it was working with the publisher to get it. So I don't know, something must have expired and then they brought it back. So that was kind of annoying. I don't know if anybody else has ever experienced that sort of situation with Everand. I'm new to it, so let me know if that's a thing that happens a lot, because that was really crappy to turn on my book and I couldn't read it. So getting back to the book itself, 4.5 stars. I loved this. If you're a Darcy Coates fan or you're looking to get into some of her haunted house books, this duology I would definitely recommend. So the first book is House of Shadows, and the second book is House of Secrets. So really enjoyed this one, and I have a love for these characters, and I'm so happy that I'm finally broken out of this reading slump as well. So Darcy Coates does it again, because she's broken me out of a reading slump before. And then the last book I wanted to talk about was this one, The Shape of Darkness by Laura Purcell. And this was the March pick for the Haunted Victorian Book Club, and we finally hit a great book. So this, I really enjoyed this one. This is my second book that I've read by Laura Purcell. I still haven't read The Silent Companions, which is like her most popular book, and from what I hear, her most spooky book. But this one definitely delivered the goods. So it was kind of meandering through the first 2/3, half to 2/3 of the book. Still an enjoyable story, but where she really excels, Laura Purcell really excels in the atmosphere and the gothicness and Victorian London for the low class. So the struggles and the hardships for especially women, I found in this story, and what they had to do to try to keep themselves going, and you know, spiritualism and mediumship and all of that, which was very, very popular during Victorian times. And I love this. We also, just yesterday actually, I had a discussion with my friend Sharon Joy from Sharon Joy Reads about this book, and we had some great conversation from people in the comments as well. And somebody actually said that this is even more depressing than Dickens. It is a very, very depressing story, but it's fantastic. I gave it 3.5 stars. Now, it's one of those books that I loved it. It was great, and I was headed for a 4-star. I would say this definitely should have been a 4 to 4.5 star read. The only reason why I brought my star rating down was because it's very twisty turny. There's a lot of reveals. There's a lot of plot twists right at the end of the book, and it's like bang, 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 bang for the last few chapters. And there were so many reveals and so many twists that you really had to try to think to keep everything straight in your head. I would have preferred, and Sharon said the same thing, if those reveals were kind of spaced out a little bit more. So that's the only thing I'll say that I didn't like about the book. Like I said, it should have been a 4 to 4.5 star read. I really enjoyed it, but that's the only reason why I brought my star rating down, was because all of that was kind of jammed into the last part of the book. However, this was great. It's a dual timeline. And like I said, it really highlights those hardships. There's a lot of historical facts and accuracies and everything in this book that will lead you down a rabbit hole to look it up yourself, which I love when that happens within my fiction, that, you know, things are very accurate for the time period. It's very accurate for the hardships, for what low-class people had to go through during that period. And then we have these two situations with a woman who is doing like shadow portraits that you would use in cameos from that period, and people that come in and sit to have their portrait done end up murdered. And so there's kind of a murder mystery here. And then on the other hand, there's these other two sisters, who the younger sister is only 11 years old, and she is a spirit medium. She's also albino. And her older sister, who's running the business to bring spiritualists and people who are interested in having seances into the house, and then doing all of this. So those two storylines converge, and it is really, really a fantastic story. So I would definitely recommend this one. Go back to the live section on the channel if you wanted to hear the discussion. It's only about 50 minutes or so long, and but I would definitely recommend this one. And again, I'll have all of the information linked down below for the Haunted Victorian Book Club if you would like to join. So that's it. That's everything that I had to talk to you guys today. I'm so happy to finally be broken out of this reading slump that I've been in. We're full swing old school April right now, so I'm doing a lot of short reads, which also is something that helps me to break me out of a reading slump. It's perfect. And so if you enjoyed the video, give me a thumbs up and leave me a question or comment down below, because you know I love chatting with you guys. But until next time, stay spooky, everybody. Bye.